After my death, the position of the empress in the central palace remained vacant. David Johnson had the ministers who presented memorials to make Emily Davis the empress executed. I promised Alice that she would be the only empress in my life when I was alive. I had shown kindness to David. After David was banished from the capital, only I was willing to marry him. Emily, my half-sister, disliked David for being just a prince and delayed getting on the wedding sedan chair. To protect the reputation of the sisters in my clan, I gave up the position of the crown princess and married David instead. With the support of my maternal family, David launched a palace coup. The crown prince was placed under house arrest, and Emily, the crown princess, knelt on the ground begging for mercy. This humble concubine is willing to serve your majesty in place of my elder sister. When Emily entered the palace and her rank reached the highest level of imperial concubine and couldn't be promoted further, David took back my phoenix seal. The affairs of the 6 palaces are so onerous. It's better to share half of them with the imperial concubine. I set fire to the cunning palace and sacrificed myself to prove my loyalty. He tightly held the phoenix seal and announced to the world that he would never establish an empress again. David hugged my old clothes, and his tears soaked them. In the next life, Alice will still be the empress of the Great Liang. When I opened my eyes again, I was back on the night when Emily and I were getting married. This time, I finally got on the wedding sedan chair heading for the Eastern Palace as I wished. But a group of people blocked my way at the entrance of the Eastern Palace. In the previous life, Emily told me that she had affairs with the playboys in the capital. If I didn't agree to change the marriage, she would make it public. I don't care. But what will others think of Sarah, the unmarried daughter of the Song family? Sarah is my own sister. She had a rough childhood. Our mother passed away when she was still in the cradle, after Emily's mother was made the legal wife by my father. She made things difficult for Sarah and me in every possible way. So our grandmother took Sarah and me to her mansion. I taught Sarah to read and write myself. Sarah and I were very close. Before getting married, she clung to my sleeve and cried like a tearful mess. After I got married, Sarah was all alone. Fortunately, our grandfather found a talented and handsome young man for her, the heir of the Marquis of Dingyuan, Xia Heng. They grew up together and understood each other's hearts. But now, Emily was ready to go all out. If she spread the news, it would surely implicate the daughters of the Brown family, especially Sarah, as the eldest sister is like a mother. As long as Sarah could be happy, I was willing to give up the position of the crown princess. Moreover, I had heard that although David was not in favor with the emperor, he was well known for his virtue. He had set up porridge sheds and saved countless people. I thought he was a decent man, different from those playboys who chased after women. If we could respect each other in marriage, it wouldn't be a waste for me to help Sarah and the heir. In the previous life, I took off the wedding dress embroidered with colorful phoenixes. From then on, Emily replaced me as the crown princess and enjoyed all the glory and wealth in the Eastern Palace. I, on the other hand, traveled a long distance to the military camp and endured the harsh conditions with David in the cold and desolate place. I was a delicate girl, cherished by my parents since childhood. I lay on the couch, stopped sewing, and trembled all over. Despite the urgent military situation, David rushed to the camp, opened his fox fur cloak wide and hugged me tightly. Alice, you've suffered. If it weren't for me, you wouldn't have caught a cold. I, David, will never let your sacrifice go in vain. Love is always about feeling indebted. At that time, I was glad that although I got on the wrong wedding sedan chair, I married the right man. Although David was of humble birth, he had a sincere heart. A priceless treasure is easy to find, but a sincere heart is the rarest. David's mother was just a maid. The emperor drunkenly favored her and she got pregnant. The emperor was very disgusted with this unexpected child and often scolded David for being born of a low-class maid. When arranging his marriage, the emperor naturally didn't consider noble ladies from marquis families. Among those of a matching family background, Only Emily Davis was a suitable match. Unfortunately, Emily was arrogant and ambitious, dreaming of becoming the crown princess. How could David Johnson, the unfavored Prince of Wu, catch her eye? Although the distance was great, the second miss of the Brown family's disdain still reached David's ears. David hugged me tightly and swore to treat me 1,000 times better. Alice, I'll never forget your kindness. I'll make you the most noble woman in the world. You'll have everything the crown princess has, and even more. From then on, David fought even more bravely in battles and made numerous military achievements. Later, with the support of my maternal family, David brought down Robert Williams, the crown prince. Blood flowed like a river in the Eastern Palace, and Robert was placed under house arrest. Emily, the crown princess, clung to David's legs, crying pitifully. My elder sister is in poor health. I'm willing to serve your majesty in her place. David, unable to vent his hatred towards Robert, took it out on Emily. He didn't attend court for several days and promised to remove Emily's criminal status and take her into the harem. A subject seizing the throne from the monarch is an act of insubordination. A younger brother taking his elder brother's wife is a violation of moral principles. FORA time. Rumors spread throughout the court and the country. The change of power was not legitimate. The foundation was not yet stable, and the situation was turbulent. David's former trusted subordinates risked their lives to persuade him, but their attempts were in vain. Instead of listening, David even killed his personal guard who had once saved his life. Those who persuade me will die. The loyal ministers placed their last hope on me. When I was the princess, David respected me and regarded me as a divine being. I put on solemn court clothes and tried to persuade David earnestly, but it only made him furious. Alice, you've changed. Since you became the queen, you're no longer as wholeheartedly in love with me as before. David turned his back to me, his voice cold. Before, you only cared about whether I was happy. Now, you always talk about the country first and the people most important. But he didn't know that I was originally raised to be the mother of the nation. I was born on the first day of the first lunar month, and my birth date and time were calculated to be of the Kuan hexagram, indicating future extreme nobility. The fortune teller was amazed when he saw my face. This girl is extremely noble. Whoever gets her will get the world. From then on, besides having my mother teach me music, chess, calligraphy, and painting, my father also invited the director of the Imperial College to teach me the classics in person. All my speech, knowledge, and behavior were cultivated according to the standards of a wise and virtuous queen. At the age of 6, I was betrothed to Robert by the late emperor and was supposed to enter the Eastern Palace when I came of age. If it weren't for Emily forcing me to marry David instead, it would have been Robert who got the support of my maternal family. By then, David would probably have become a prisoner long ago. Instead of looking down on others with a cold and intimidating look now, I knelt on the ground, with the unstable cord on my shoulders and the suffering people on my back. Please, Your Majesty, put the country's affairs first. David was furious. Since you're so benevolent and wise, then you take the throne. After a while, realizing he had spoken out of turn, David changed his tone. Since you're so benevolent and wise, then kneel outside this palace for 3 days and 3 nights to show your sincerity. I thought that David and I were a young couple deeply in love and had never quarreled. I never thought he would be so heartless, but I was wrong. Now, David in the imperial robes was completely different from the Prince of Wu who took off his warm fox fur cloak to keep me warm on the frontier. As he left, his dragon robe fluttered and knocked off the phoenix hairpin on my temple. I remembered the day of our wedding. David carefully lifted my wedding veil but still accidentally knocked the hairpin askew. He bowed nervously to apologize and then gently put the hairpin back in place. I picked up the urban and blew warm air on my freezing red hands. It was the depth of winter. The cold wind outside the palace was bone-chilling. Alice's knees were buried deep in the snowdrifts. The heavy snow had been falling ceaselessly for days. She had old injuries from the days when she accompanied David to the border. Today, she was even more vulnerable to the harsh weather. The blood she coughed up stained the white snow in front of her knees red. The maids and eunuchs, who had always received her kindness, couldn't bear to watch. Ruby secretly slipped a hot water bottle to her. Bill led hundreds of young eunuchs and knelt on the ground all at once. David was furious. I never knew that the queen was so good at winning people's hearts. Don't you all think Emily is a criminal woman? I'll promote her. David flung his sleeves and left, disappearing on the way to Emily's quarters. Before dawn the next day, Alice had a high fever and fell into a coma. David held her in his arms and wept bitterly. He personally served her the herbal medicine, carefully feeding her spoon by spoon. He stayed by her side day and night without changing his clothes until she woke up. David also ordered Emily to be brought outside Alice's quarters. He told Bill to slap her more than a dozen times and ordered her to kneel on the ice chips for 3 days and nights. But before an incense stick had burned out, Emily fainted. David gently placed Alice aside from his arms and got up to leave without even putting on his cloak. The hurried and heavy footsteps on the snow outside the palace could be heard clearly. Alice turned over, facing the wall, and her tears soaked the pillow. In the past, David had treated Alice like a precious treasure. When she caught a cold, David was so worried that he couldn't eat or sleep. To get the medicine, David rode alone for 1,000 miles to bring a famous doctor from the capital to treat her. Since the medicine needed blood as a guide, David took out a dagger and cut his wrist, feeding his blood into Alice's mouth. Alice also loved him with all her heart. She sewed military uniforms for him and damaged her eyes. When he charged into battle, she beat the drums at the risk of being hit by stray arrows, showing her determination to share weal and woe with him. When he was hit by the enemy's poisoned arrow and his life was uncertain, she stayed by his side, holding poison in her hand. If anything happened to David, she would never live on. At a young age, her hair turned white overnight, but she didn't regret it. They'll hold your hand and grow old with you. After 10 years of mutual support, all her love was in vain, because Emily had looked down on David when he was poor. David spent his whole life proving himself. The things he couldn't get when he was young haunted his most carefree years. Even after David became the emperor, this obsession couldn't be dispelled, even though Alice had never left his side during his most difficult times. The woman he couldn't forget the most was still the one who had looked down on him. Emily pretended to be unconscious when David had accompanied her one day more than he had accompanied Alice. She opened her sleepy eyes and sobbed on David's body. I don't mean to outshine the Empress on purpose. The Empress has been favored by God since childhood. She's the apple of her parents' eyes and has received all kinds of love. Even the servants like her. But I'm so humble and unlucky. No one loves me. And the servants don't even look at me properly. I'm like a grass figure abandoned by God. Your Majesty, a precious and noble person, will never understand. Her words brought back David's old memories. How could I not understand? My deposed crown prince brother was surrounded by people when he was alive. Even when the emperor bestowed a marriage, he was carefully selected. What was left was for me. Emily pulled David's hand and put it on her chest. Your Majesty, my heart is even colder than this weather. Don't you feel sorry for me? With such a charming woman in his arms, David forgot all about Alice. He indulged in pleasure all night. The next day, before Alice had fully recovered, David couldn't wait to remove Emily's slave status and quickly made her a noble concubine. Not long after Emily became concubine Emily, Ruby died suddenly one night, and Bill committed suicide by swallowing gold. When David was about to investigate, Emily stopped him. Maids and eunuchs are born with a lowly life. It doesn't matter if they die. Alice struggled out of her sickbed and ordered people to bury them. She invited a Buddhist monk to hold a religious ceremony to pacify the souls of the dead. Alice chanted the mantra of rebirth in front of the Buddha and lit 3 incense sticks. No one's life is worthless. Everyone was once the apple of their parents' eyes. As palace maids and eunuchs, they're doomed to an eventful life. But it doesn't mean they should be trampled on. Your deaths won't be in vain. At this moment, I was extremely disappointed in David Johnson. With his meticulous nature, he couldn't have been unaware of Emily Davis' intentions. Emily was making an example of someone to secretly warn the people in the palace to ignore me. Now that she was in the emperor's favor, anyone who was kind to me was going against her and would end up badly. Without David's indulgence and approval, Emily wouldn't have dared to be so arrogant. David thought I was unworthy of him. He believed that the position of the queen was his reward to me, but he forgot that the main force during the palace coup came from my maternal family. Great kindness can turn into great hatred, especially between young couples. Just to vent his anger, he allowed Emily to harm innocent people. I summoned Emily and made her kneel in front of the memorial tablets of Ruby Green and Bill Summer. Who would have thought that she had a miscarriage? David picked up Emily, his eyes sharp. Queen, you're so vicious and intolerant. It's unbefitting of your status as the mother of the nation. Soon after, David conferred the title of concubine on Emily. After that, David no longer came to the cunning palace. I watched the icicles on the eaves melt and then freeze again. I lost count of how many sleepless nights I spent lying in my clothes, waiting for dawn by the candlelight. Finally, I waited for David. David changed his previous cold attitude and rewarded me with all the snail-shaped eyebrow pencils that the Persian kingdom had offered as tribute. Alice, you've lost weight. I've let you down. David's hands had distinct joints, and there were thick calluses on the palms from battles. The warmth of his palm made my heart ache. My eyelashes fluttered slightly, and a teardrop fell on his palm. Your Majesty, there's no need to say such things between you and me. I only hope to share your worries. David's eyes moved, and he suddenly tightened his grip on my hand. Alice, I know you love me the most in the world. Suddenly, his tone changed. I'm concerned that you're so frail. Handling the affairs of the 6 palaces is exhausting. Why don't you let Emily share half of the workload with you? I smiled. No wonder he was so attentive today, offering treasures and showing concern. It turned out he felt guilty. My delicate eyebrows frowned, and I pulled out my phoenix hairpin and pressed it against my neck. Your Majesty, if you insist on this, you might as well order me to death. After all, David still remembered the old affection. Although he was unhappy, he didn't force me anymore. But in March of the following year, Emily was promoted to imperial concubine and replaced me in presiding over the rite of the first silkworm, leading the concubines to offer sacrifices to the silkworm goddess. My heart tightened, but I remained calm on the surface. I understood that David was angry with me now. He was no longer as simple-minded as before, always following my wishes, seeing that Emily was in full favor. If she had a child before me in the future, with the child's status, my days would become more and more difficult. I asked the maid to do my hair in a cloud-like hairstyle and dressed up carefully. I prepared a table of delicious food in the cunning palace and took out the fine wine offered as tribute, waiting for David to come to the banquet after court. After a moment of pleasure, David got drunk. After 10 months of pregnancy, the birth of the child made me breathe a sigh of relief. In this depressing and cold palace, I finally came back to life. Even though David Johnson treated the child coldly, he still made him crown prince due to the influence of my maternal family. But I no longer cared for him. My heart belonged entirely to Thomas Brown. Emily Davis tried to visit several times, but I always sent her away, fearing she might harm him. This time, however, David brought Emily along. With me here, Your Majesty need not worry, he said. Yet after they left, my child fell gravely ill and died within 3 days. The rain poured relentlessly that day, holding the little crown prince who gasped his last breaths. I pounded on every palace door, but no one answered. The imperial hospital stood empty. Every physician had been summoned by David to attend Emily's childbirth. I pressed Thomas' cold cheek against mine. Don't be afraid, Tom. Mother is here. When the palace snow melts, we'll picnic and fly kites in the spring. My child was born in winter. His short life knowing only endless ice and snow, never seeing spring. I felt his breathing fade in my arms. Distant bells and drums echoed as I lifted my head. Eunuchs hurried through the Guanju palace, celebrating the new prince. Dizzy, I stumbled into the hall clutching Thomas. Emily lay in David's arms, smirking defiantly. I snatched my phoenix hairpin and lunged at her throat, only grazing her skin. David wrenched my wrist until bones nearly snapped, ordering eunuchs to seize Thomas. The crown prince contracted plague. Bury him immediately. I watched them carry him away rolled in a straw mat, my heart pierced by 1,000 arrows. Snarling like a wolf, I bit David's arm. The Empress has gone mad, he declared. With that, the court historian brushed his pen across parchment, sealing my fate in a single line. Later confined to Cunning Palace. I stared at untrodden snow marked only by occasional bird tracks. David hadn't visited for months. Clutching Thomas' handmade spring robes, I sang his lullaby. The sky is quiet and still. The boat rocks gently. Birds neither fly nor sing. Sleep well, little one. Your Majesty, the Emperor is here. David came to reclaim my Empress seal. Alice, I'm torn. An Empress must embody grace. Yet you've lost composure. The Crown Prince died here. This place bears ill fortune. Rest at the royal temple. I'll reinstate you once recovered. Very well, Your Majesty. My swift agreement surprised him. Any last words? I nearly demanded why he betrayed me. Why our vows meant nothing, but meeting his icy gaze. I thought of my aged grandfather and Sarah Miller. A new mother. Swallowing my rage, I wiped tears and smiled at his familiar yet strange face. The wind is cold and the dew heavy. I pray Your Majesty dresses warmly. From now on, stop missing each other. He was slightly stunned, wanting to say something but finally remaining silent. As soon as David Johnson turned around, I lit the curtain. The fire snakes writhed, and the Cunning Palace was engulfed in a sea of flames. Alice. David rushed in to save me. But it was too late. In the end, he only retrieved an old dress, the one I wore when I got married. A lively wedding march woke me up from the sedan chair. I rubbed my temples, and there was still a dull pain in my chest. When the wedding sedan stopped in front of the Brown family mansion, I lifted a corner of the curtain. Colorful fish lanterns and lotus lanterns were hung on both sides of the long street, and the light was flowing. Children were shuttling through the crowd with sugar-coated haws in their hands, laughing and playing. The cries of the street vendors and the cheers of the lantern riddle guessing were coming one after another. The air was filled with the sweet fragrance of osmanthus candy and fried pastries, as well as the faint smell of saltpeter after the fireworks burned out. I also got married on the Lantern Festival in my previous life. Everything now was as lively as in my memory. The sedan stopped at the door. It wasn't the shabby side door of the Johnson mansion in my memory. Instead, it was the magnificent main entrance of the East Palace. The vermilion-painted gate was wide open, with guards standing at attention and palace servants with their heads bowed. Robert Williams, wearing a bright yellow ceremonial robe, was standing on the steps, looking over with a gentle expression. Right. In this life, Emily didn't force me to change the marriage. She was also reborn. She knew that David would eventually ascend the throne, so she went straight for David. I would marry the crown prince as originally destined. Before the curtain of the sedan fell, I caught a glimpse of a figure in black standing on the street corner out of the corner of my eye. It was David. He reined in his horse and stood there like a silent statue, his gloomy gaze fixed firmly on the wedding sedan. The sound of a swan playing the tune of hundreds of birds paying homage to the phoenix rang out. The sedan was steadily lifted and headed towards the East Palace gate. Just as it was about to cross the threshold, the sedan stopped. The sound of horses' hooves thundered like thunder. David actually rode his horse straight towards the wedding procession. The guards hurriedly tried to stop him, but he pushed them aside with one hand. He dismounted from his horse and walked straight up to the crown prince. Kneeling on one knee, "Your humble brother has something to ask of your highness." Please grant my request." The whole place fell silent. Even the wedding music stopped. Robert slightly raised his eyebrows and said gently, "Isn't it time for you, third brother, to prepare to welcome your bride in your own mansion today? The sedan of Miss Song Yuan must be almost here. Your humble brother won't marry Emily." David raised his head, his eyes terrifyingly red. "The one your humble brother wants to marry is the eldest daughter of the Brown family, Alice." The wedding official was so scared that he let out a note and quickly hid the swana in his sleeve. I was sitting in the sedan, cold sweat breaking out on my palms. David was indeed reborn too. "Third brother, be careful with your words." Robert's voice turned a bit colder. "The marriage between Miss Songda and me was decided by the emperor. Your humble brother knows," David said anxiously. "But your humble brother and Alice had an agreement in the previous life. She was supposed to be your humble brother's wife." As soon as these words were spoken, even Robert was stunned. The surrounding officials looked at each other in dismay, thinking that David had gone crazy. Only I knew that David was telling the truth. 10 years of marriage in the previous life. Those hugs in the snow, the drumming on the battlefield, and the determination in the cunning palace. Scenes flashed before my eyes. But I couldn't admit it. Once I did, this life would be entangled with the previous one again. David Johnson. I sat upright in the bridal sedan, not lifting the curtain, speaking to him only through the thin layer of red silk. "I have never had any dealings with you, so how could there be a promise from a past life? Today is my wedding day with Robert Williams. The first implore you not to speak recklessly and tarnish the royal dignity." My voice was calm, tinged with a hint of confusion and hurt. David froze, as if stabbed in the face. "Alice, you're back. Give me a chance to make amends. I don't understand what you're saying. Please show some restraint." David staggered back a step. Just then, another bridal sedan hurriedly arrived. Emily Davis tore off her own veil and rushed down, grabbing David's sleeve. "David, today is our wedding day." David didn't even glance at her, shoving her away. "Get lost." Emily fell to the ground, her face full of shock and resentment. Robert spoke coolly. "David, that's enough." His tone wasn't heavy, but it carried the authority of the crown prince. "Today is my wedding. If you still consider yourself a prince, take your new bride and leave. If you cause any more trouble, don't blame me for abandoning brotherly bonds." Guards stepped forward, half guiding, half dragging David away. Emily was helped up, glared at me hatefully, and chased after them. The wedding music resumed, supported by the matron of honor. I stepped over the fire basin and entered the Eastern Palace. The threshold was high. As I crossed it, I heard David's hoarse shout behind me. "Alice Brown, you can't escape. In this life, whether you marry me or not, I won't let you go." I didn't look back. The night in the Eastern Palace was quiet. Red candles burned brightly, filling the room with a warm glow. Robert dismissed the attendants and personally poured 2 cups of nuptial wine. "Did today frighten you?" He handed me a cup, his voice gentle. I shook my head. "Thank you for intervening." We linked arms and drank. The wine was strong, making me cough lightly. Robert instinctively reached out to pat my back, but his hand stopped halfway and withdrew. Suddenly, fragments of a past life came to mind. Back then, David had already ascended the throne, and Robert was confined in a side hall. I had secretly visited him once. He sat by the window reading, his profile looking especially gaunt in the sunset. "Alice, you shouldn't have come." He didn't look up. "If David finds out, hell grows suspicious again." "I'm not afraid." I set down the food box. "Robert, take care." Only then did he raise his head to look at me, his eyes complex. "Alice, you take care too. That was our last meeting in that past life." Soon after, he died of illness. After finishing the nuptial wine, the attendants withdrew according to ritual, leaving only Robert and me in the hall. The dragon and phoenix wedding candles crackled, their light reflecting on his profile. Robert had drunk quite a bit that day, the corners of his eyes slightly red, his gaze lingering and tender. Tired? He asked softly. I shook my head, then nodded. A little. He smiled, stood up, walked behind me, and reached out to remove the heavy phoenix crown. His movements were light, his fingertips occasionally brushing the back of my neck, sending a faint shiver through me. These jewels are heavy, he said, placing the crown on the dressing table, then reaching to undo the jade hairpin in my hair. I instinctively turned my head slightly. His hand paused. Did I scare you? No, I said in a low voice. I'm just not used to it. The crown prince's movements were gentle and considerate. So this was how things could be between a man and a woman in bed. In my past life, my wedding night with David was in a shabby tent in the northern border military camp. He was half drunk. His actions were hasty and rough, as if he was trying to prove something. That night was painful. I thought that since I had married him, it would be for a lifetime. But a lifetime was so short. It was over before the spring flowers bloomed, and the snow had covered our heads. Alice. Robert's voice called me back. He had removed the last hairpin, and my long hair cascaded down my shoulders like a waterfall. If you're not willing, I won't force you. He looked at me in the mirror, but there was a tinge of sadness in his eyes. I'm willing. I interrupted him and turned around. I said it calmly, but my ears quietly turned red. In the candlelight, his eyes and brows were so gentle that it made my heart flutter. Robert looked at me deeply, then suddenly reached out and picked me up in his arms. I let out a soft cry and instinctively wrapped my arms around his neck. Afraid of falling, he smiled with his head down, and his chest vibrated. It won't happen. He carried me towards the bedstead, his steps steady and slow. The layers of curtains were pulled aside and then fell, enclosing us in a warm red glow. He placed me on the couch, but he didn't get close to me right away. Instead, he sat on the edge of the bed and reached out to touch my cheek. His fingertips were warm, slowly tracing from my eyebrows to my lips. When our eyes met, his gaze was like a leaping candle flame, as if it was going to devour me. Suddenly, I remembered that in my past life, David had also looked at me like this. On those cold nights in the northern border, he hugged me and said, Alice, you are my life. But later, he threw his life away as if it were a worthless thing. What are you thinking about? Robert noticed my distraction. I shook my head and took the initiative to reach out and undo the first button of his outer robe. My fingertips were a little shaky. He held my hand in his palm. His movements were slow, with deliberate restraint. The candlelight shone through the gauze curtain, casting a hazy glow on him. His shoulders were broad, and his arm had smooth lines, the mark of years of martial arts training. But he didn't look rough. Have you had enough of looking? He suddenly asked, with a smile in his eyes. My face flushed instantly, and I averted my gaze. He let out a soft laugh and leaned over. His breath approached, carrying a faint smell of wine and the fresh scent of pine and cypress. I closed my eyes and felt his lips land on my forehead. So light, like a feather brushing by. Then on my eyelids, the tip of my nose, and finally stopped at the corner of my lips. Alice, he murmured against my lips. Open your eyes and look at me. I trembled my eyelashes and opened my eyes. His eyes seemed extremely deep at such a close distance, like a night sky filled with the whole galaxy. In this life, he said softly before kissing me, they'll treat you well. At the moment our lips met, my mind went blank. His kiss was gentle, with a tentative meaning, gradually deepening bit by bit. It wasn't like a plunder, but more like an invitation. I responded awkwardly and was gradually led by him to sink into it. So this was how a kiss could be. It wasn't about possession or proof, but the closeness of two hearts. His hand touched my waist, and the belt was gently undone. When my inner garment slipped off my shoulders, I instinctively shrank back. Cold. He stopped. No. My voice was as soft as a mosquito's buzz. He understood and pulled the brocade quilt over us. It was warm inside the quilt, and his body temperature was astonishingly hot. When our skins touched, I trembled all over. "Tell me if it hurts," he whispered, his breath hot against my ear as he kissed it. I nodded, biting down on my lower lip. He was gentle throughout, taking great care and patience. He probed and checked repeatedly until I was completely relaxed before finally proceeding. I clung to his shoulders, my nails digging into his skin unconsciously. He let out a muffled groan but held me even tighter. "Alice." He murmured my name over and over again in my ear. The red curtains swayed, and the candlelight flickered dimly. All the past events seemed to fade away at this moment. The hatred, the resentment, and the tears shed in the middle of the night all melted into his scorching body heat. At the end, he held me tightly in his arms and kissed away the tears from the corner of my eyes. "Crying?" he asked hoarsely. I shook my head but couldn't utter a word. Was I crying for the grievances of my past life or the gratitude of this life? I couldn't tell myself. He didn't ask further but just stroked my back gently, as if soothing a frightened little animal. I was silent for a moment and snuggled closer to him. The sound of the night watch drum came from outside the window. It was the third watch. The red candle had burned to the end. The flame flickered a few times and finally went out. The palace hall was plunged into darkness, and only the moonlight filtered through the window screen, casting a pale glow on the floor. I found a comfortable position in his arms and closed my eyes. 3 days after the wedding, it was time to return to my parents' home. The Brown family mansion was decorated with lanterns and festoons, and my father was beaming with joy. Emily also came back, accompanied by the entourage of the Johnson family. Her entourage was even more imposing than mine. She was wearing a bright red imperial dress, with a 9-tailed phoenix hairpin in her hair. That was a headdress only the crown princess was allowed to wear. She touched the phoenix hairpin on her temple and smiled sweetly. "Sister, look. His Highness personally bestowed this on me. He said it symbolizes the harmonious union of a couple, and only the principal wife can wear it." Then, she glanced at the simple jade hairpin in my hair out of the corner of her eye. "His Highness the Crown Prince is naturally kind to sister, but this jade hairpin is still a bit lacking. Isn't it, sister?" I gently stroked the mutton-fat jade hairpin in my hair and said calmly, "Sister, do you know that the princess of the previous dynasty who was deposed for overstepping her rank also wore a 9-tailed phoenix hairpin? His Highness probably didn't tell sister when he bestowed it that this hairpin used to belong to that imperial concubine." Her face instantly turned as white as a sheet, and her hand on the phoenix hairpin trembled slightly. Just then, David walked in from outside the door. He had lost a lot of weight, with dark circles under his eyes. When he saw me, his expression changed immediately. "Ollie." He opened his mouth but then abruptly changed his words. "Sister-in-law." I curtsied. "Your Highness." "The Prince of Wu." It was polite and distant, just like strangers. He clenched his fist in his sleeve, his knuckles turning white. During the lunch, Emily kept serving David dishes, her voice coquettishly sweet. "Your Highness, try this. It's stewed by your humble wife herself." David didn't even look at it. He stared intently at Robert peeling a shrimp for me. "You like this?" Robert said slowly as he peeled the shrimp and put the peeled shrimp into my bowl, his movements as natural as if he had done it 1,000 times. I was stunned. In my past life, only one person knew that I liked shrimp. It was David. In the northern border where supplies were scarce, whenever a merchant caravan brought seafood, he would always peel all the shrimps for me and only eat the leftovers himself. "Alice is too thin. She needs to eat more," he always said at that time. But later, when he ascended the throne and the table was filled with delicacies from mountains and seas, he never peeled shrimps for me again. "How does your Highness know?" I asked softly. Robert just smiled and didn't say a word. Opposite me, David suddenly threw down his chopsticks. Your humble subject is not feeling well. I'll leave first." He stood up and left. Emily hurriedly chased after him. My father looked embarrassed, but Robert remained calm. "My third brother is impatient. Father-in-law. Don't take it to heart." The meal was tasteless. After the meal, I was taking a walk in the plum grove in the backyard when David suddenly appeared out of nowhere and grabbed my wrist. "Alice, let's talk." His eyes were bloodshot, and he reeked of alcohol. "Your Highness, please let go." I tried to break free. "If someone sees us, they'll laugh at us." "So what?" He let out a low laugh, which was shrill. "Anyway, in this life, if I can't have you, does it really matter if it's a joke?" He held on tightly, his nails almost digging into my flesh. "Do you know how I've been these days? I can't sleep every night. As soon as I close my eyes, I see you being burned to death. And Thomas, he was lying in your arms. So small." "David." I interrupted him sharply. "Stop talking." He stared at me, and tears rolled down his face without warning. "Alice, give me a chance, okay? In this life, I don't want anything. The throne, power. I don't want them all. Let's leave the capital city. Go to the south of the Yangtze River. Go to the frontier. Anywhere is fine. Just the two of us. Start over." He spoke sincerely. If it were the me from the past life, perhaps I would have softened my heart. But now, I just felt sad. "David." I yanked my hand back forcefully and rubbed my wrist. "I'm the crown princess now. Soon. I'll be the queen. Your sister-in-law." The last sentence was like a knife, stabbing into his heart. He staggered back and bumped into a plum tree. Petals fluttered down. He gave a bitter laugh. "Alice, you've changed. You used to be such a kind-hearted person, but now your heart is so cruel. In the past life, it was because I wasn't cruel enough that I ended up dead with no trace left. I would never make the same mistake again." He turned around and left. His back swayed unsteadily in the depths of the plum grove and finally disappeared. I stood there, looking at the red marks on my palm that he had pinched out. Suddenly, a cloak fell on my shoulders. Robert didn't know when he had come behind me. "It's cold," he said gently. "Let's go back." I turned to look at him. The shadows of the plum blossoms were slanting across his moon-white robe. Robert had gentle eyebrows and clear eyes, completely different from David's madness and paranoia. "Your Highness, I only saw you alone. I didn't see anything else." He pulled the cloak tighter around me. "I only care if you're hurt." I shook my head, looking at his serious eyes. Something in my heart stirred faintly. On the carriage back to the Eastern Palace, Robert handed me a brocade box. "Open it and have a look." There was plain brocade in the box. Lying on it was a golden phoenix hairpin made of piled beads and interwoven wires. It was woven with gold threads as thin as hair. The phoenix's head was slightly raised, and it held an oriental pearl like a teardrop in its mouth. The pearl had a restrained luster, but it made the candles in the whole room seem a bit dimmer. This was no ordinary jewelry. It was a 9-tailed phoenix hairpin that only the queen of the Middle Palace could wear. "This is a make-up wedding gift for you." He smiled. "That day was in a rush. I was only thinking about marrying you quick. KLY. Not even giving you a decent piece of jewelry." As I stroked the phoenix hairpin, I suddenly remembered something. In the year when I came of age in the past life, I once received an unscented mutton fat jade orchid hairpin. It was exactly the same as the one I pawned. There was no signature, no mark, only a note attached. "I give you an orchid hairpin. May all that you've lost return to you in this life, and may all your wishes come true." I wore that hairpin for many years, and it was still in my hair until now. "Your Highness." I looked up at him. "Was it you who sent me that orchid hairpin?" Robert was stunned for a moment. Then, he slowly nodded. "Yes, it was me," he said softly. "At that time, I was afraid that you already had someone in your heart. I was afraid that my status would bring you trouble. So I didn't sign my name. My heart skipped a beat. The carriage rumbled forward. Scenes outside the window flashed by like a revolving lantern from a past life. It turned out that besides the intense, mad love of David Johnson, there was another kind of love, quiet, restrained, yet enduring. The carriage entered the Eastern Palace. Moonlight spilled down, casting a gentle glow on his profile, soft as a long-held dream. And I knew the journey of this life was only just beginning. David wouldn't let go. Emily Davis wouldn't give up. But this time, I wasn't alone. I had my crown prince. Life in the Eastern Palace flowed with hidden currents beneath its calm surface. Robert Williams began involving me in state affairs. At first, he just had me listen in on his discussions with advisors. But gradually he started asking for my opinion. The northern border suffered a snow disaster this year. The Ministry of Revenue proposes allocating 500,000 taels for relief. What do you think, Alice Brown? He asked, pointing to the memorial. I glanced at the figure. With 500,000 taels transported from the capital to the north, losses along the way and officials skimming off the top mean only 300,000 might reach the people. If we're lucky, better to allocate 300,000 taels and send an imperial envoy with seeds and farming tools worth 200,000. We need to relieve the disaster. But safeguarding next spring's planting is even more crucial. Robert's eyes lit up. That's an excellent approach. Alice, you're remarkably clever. One of the advisors frowned. Women meddling in politics might be an ill omen. Whether it's an omen depends on the outcome. Robert said calmly. What Alice said makes sense, so we should adopt it. What does gender have to do with it? He turned to me. A look of approval in his eyes. Warmth spread through me. In my past life with David, I often offered ideas, but he always said, the inner court shouldn't interfere in politics. Leave these matters to me. Then turned to ask Emily, what do you think, Emily? Emily dropped to her knees with a thud. Your Majesty is wise. David, no one in the world compares to you. Emily couldn't say anything beyond flattery, but David loved hearing it. He thought that was how a woman should be. What are you thinking about? Robert asked softly. I shook my head. Just that you're different from others. How so? You treat me like a person, I said with a smile. Someone to talk to and discuss things with. Not a mere ornament. Robert was silent for a moment, then took my hand. In the future, they'll have you stand openly in the Hall of Governance. You'll review memorials, speak in court debates, and women everywhere will look up to you. The name Alice Brown will be linked to this nation. His palm was warm. Outside, spring light was perfect. On the Shaanxi Festival, the third day of the third month, as Alice Brown, I hosted a palace banquet, leading noblewomen in purification rituals and prayers by the water. But Emily was nowhere to be seen. After a while, Emily arrived late, trailed by a crowd of maids and matrons, dressed in bright red palace attire. She patted her belly lightly. I'm pregnant, so it's hard to move quickly. You won't blame me for being late, will you, sister? Emily's eyes danced as she suddenly covered her lips with a handkerchief and leaned close to my ear. His Highness keeps me up all night, she whispered. She tilted her head back, her fingers tracing her pale neck where faint crimson marks were visible. He's trained in martial arts for years, full of vigor, and quite energetic. She lifted her gaze, sweeping it over my flat abdomen. You and the Crown Prince have been married for some time now. You should hurry up. After all, the title of legitimate eldest grandson is supremely important. Silence fell instantly. Noblewomen exchanged glances. If Emily gave birth to a royal grandson, David's standing in David's eyes would shift dramatically. Emily raised an eyebrow and continued. His Highness says that this child and I are the dearest things to him now. He insists the imperial physician checks on us daily. She paused, extending a finger painted with bright red polish, examining it in the sunlight. Now, Even one of my fingers is more precious than some barren woman's life. I picked up my teacup, slowly skimming the foam with the lid, not even lifting my eyelids. Your hands are indeed well maintained, I said softly, taking a sip as the tea's fragrance swirled. I just recall that palace traditions advise pregnant women against painting their nails to protect the fetus health, I said, my gaze drifting lightly to her nails. The maid at Prince David's residence is getting old and has overlooked such details. I set down the teacup, the porcelain clinking crisply. Emily Davis' face paled slightly, her hands instinctively retreating into her sleeves. I turned to the head maid beside me. Since those serving you are neglectful, I must step in to care for you. The head maid understood and approached Emily Davis. Emily suddenly looked up, fear flashing in her eyes. I lowered my gaze and sipped tea, listening to the piercing screams as if hearing nothing. 10 bright red, intact nail polish pieces fell one by one onto the snow-white brocade, like withered flowers, smiling faintly at her ashen face. I said, "Sister, don't blame me. It's for the sake of the royal heir in your womb." Emily was drenched in cold sweat, collapsing to her knees, fingers dripping with blood. Alice Brown, you may be powerful now, but once I bear the royal grandson, I will surely. You won't even save your own life. A cold voice interrupted Emily. Robert Williams had approached unnoticed and stood by my side. I heard from the Emperor that David diverted 300,000 taels of northern border military funds to build your bedchamber. The Emperor is furious and plans a thorough investigation. He paused, his eyes turning icy. Right now, whether Prince David can retain his title is uncertain. As Prince David's consort, instead of reflecting in seclusion, you're here spouting nonsense and insulting the crown princess. The imperial physician should examine your mind, not your belly. Emily's face instantly whitened. The noble ladies around eyed Emily with disdain. Emily gritted her teeth, glared fiercely at me, and turned away. After she had gone, Robert whispered, "David did divert the funds, but not for a palace. It was to secretly recruit troops and buy horses." My heart tightened. Is he rebelling? Not yet. Robert shook his head. But soon. I've set the trap, waiting only for him to act. Studying his calm profile, I suddenly realized this life's crown prince differed entirely from the one in the past life. Ambushed and captured helplessly by David, he had been reborn too, and planned earlier than I. Your Highness, I asked softly, when did you return? Robert halted. We sat in a waterside pavilion, dismissing the attendants. 3 months before you, he confessed. When I awoke, I was still crown prince. The emperor was healthy, and you were unmarried. He looked at me. My first act was to ask the emperor to decree our swift marriage. Why? I couldn't help asking. In our past life, we rarely crossed paths. Robert smiled, a trace of melancholy in it. He lifted his eyes to the shimmering water outside, his voice light as if fearing to disturb old dreams. At 6, you attended your first palace banquet, tripped on the jade steps, scraped your knee bloody, eyes reddening. Yet you bit your lip and didn't cry. He paused, a slight curve at his lips. I slipped a pine nut candy into your palm when no one noticed. That winter when you were 12, in the plum garden, you picked blossoms, draped in a grand red feather cloak. Standing beneath the plum tree, the Empress saw it and ordered me to paint you with the flowers. That painting still hangs on my study wall. When government affairs overwhelm me, I glance up and feel calm. He met my gaze, eyes soft as moonlight. I remember every encounter with you. So early. I thought I first met Prince David when he set up that 10-mile soup kitchen outside. Robert's smile turned bitter. In the 12th year of Yuan, a great plague struck the capital's outskirts. Refugees everywhere, sent by the emperor's secret decree to inspect. I hid my identity and set up a soup kitchen outside the city. You were about 14 then, with a few servants. also erecting a simple medical tent to dispense medicine to sick refugees. I was slightly stunned, feeling as if something had struck my heart. You wore a half-worn goose yellow rituan. Your hair simply tied up. Your face covered with plain gauze. Busy and sweating profusely. He recalled softly, a faint smile in his eyes. A child had a high fever and convulsions, and you didn't hesitate to cut your own finger, mixing your blood with medicine to feed him. You said a maiden's blood could be used as a medicinal catalyst, an old folk remedy from ancient texts. My heart trembled slightly. That incident, even the maids by my side didn't know about it. Later, you were so exhausted you could barely stand, and I stepped forward to support you, handing you a bowl of clear water. He looked at me, his gaze deep. You took the water, looked up at me, your eyes shining like the moon in the sky. You said, "Kind sir, but with the epidemic raging here, it's best to leave quickly." I murmured, "But at the time, you claimed you were David Johnson." He lifted his head, his eyes blazing as he looked at me. Back then, I thought, if my future wife were someone like this, how wonderful it would be. If I rashly revealed my identity, it would only bring you trouble. But later I learned that the girl was you. My Alice. He smiled self-mockingly. Fate plays tricks. I never imagined that the pampered daughter of the Brown family, the future Alice, would be willing to come here. Alice, you're different from all the sheltered girls I've seen in the capital. Memories flooded back. That year, I dragged Emily Davis along. At first, she was full of disgust and refused, until she overheard maids whispering Robert might personally come to inspect. And then she dressed up elaborately and followed. But when we arrived, seeing that the nobleman helping out called himself David, and noticing the refugees in tattered clothes, the food distribution center smelling foul, she covered her nose with a handkerchief and turned away. Robert continued, "You stayed at the medical tent for 3 straight days. And I watched you pawn your jade hairpin to buy medicine. I had someone secretly redeem it and returned it to you as your comingafage gift." I covered my mouth abruptly. That white jade hairpin, the pawn shop owner said a nobleman from the palace had redeemed it at a high price. I always thought it was David. The spring breeze brushed the bronze bell at the pavilion corner, tinkling softly. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I heard my voice choke with emotion. In the past life, I missed my chance. He gripped my hands tightly, his palms warm and firm. In this life, I won't let go. I looked at the person before me. This Robert I had barely noticed in my past life. The husband I thought was just a political marriage partner. The part of my heart that had been frozen for too long burned with pain and warmed with tenderness. It turned out fate hadn't only given me a nightmare of being consumed by fire. It had quietly planted a seed, waiting silently through the harsh winter of the previous life, finally sprouting in this spring. Later, when you married David, I saw you once from afar. In the northern frontier, you wore coarse clothes, bandaging wounded soldiers in the camp. Your hands were covered in frostbite, but your eyes shone like stars. He paused, his voice lowering. At that moment, I thought, if you were my Alice, I'd never let you suffer like that. My heart ached intensely. On the night in the past life when David sent assassins to kill me, Robert went on. You sent William Summer to deliver a message, telling me to escape through the secret passage. I didn't believe you then. He closed his eyes. In the end, I couldn't make a comeback, and you were driven to your death. In this life, he opened his eyes, his gaze as solid as stone. I won't let that happen again. Robert gently pulled me into his embrace. Alice. His breath brushed my ear, carrying a reassuring coolness. Don't be afraid. In this life, I'll protect you. I hugged his back tightly, burying my face deep in his chest, and let out a long sigh. In this life, I finally didn't have to face death alone in the fire. He was my steadfast support. I looked up at him and whispered, Robert, in this life, hold my hand tightly. Tears slid unexpectedly from my lashes. Don't let me go again. The steady heart in his chest skipped a beat suddenly, and his arms tightened abruptly. Spring light filtered through the gaps in the leaves, casting over our embracing figures. The shimmering water surface rippled as the spring breeze blew, stirring gentle waves that rocked our reflections. In April, war suddenly broke out at the border. Barbarian cavalry rode south, capturing 3 cities in a row. No one in the court dared to volunteer. David stepped forward. Your son wishes to atone through meritorious service. The emperor was overjoyed, immediately appointing him as the Northern Expedition General and assigning 100,000 elite troops. On the eve of his departure from the capital, he secretly sneaked into the Eastern Palace. Alice. He climbed in through the window, dressed in black night clothes. Come with me. I was removing my makeup at the mirror. David. I pushed him away. Alice. You won't be for long. Madness flashed in his eyes. Robert won't live much longer. I've set a deadly trap. He's doomed to die this time too. My heart stopped. What are you saying? Do you think I really care about competing for those military merits? I want the military power of 100,000 soldiers. With that power, they'll call the shots in this imperial city. He leaned in closer, lowering his voice. On the day Robert Williams sees me off for the expedition, it will be his death day. I gasped, my blood almost freezing. You want to kill the crown prince? Yes. So what? He roared. Alice Brown, come with me. After tomorrow, I will be the ruler of this world. And you will still be my empress. I felt a chill all over. So this was his plan, using the expedition as a pretext to trick his way into military power and carry out a rebellion. You're crazy. My voice trembled violently. David chuckled. Alice. I've been crazy for a long time. Since the day you burned to death in front of me. I've been crazy. He suddenly grabbed my shoulders, the force almost crushing my bones. Even if I have to resort to any means, even if it hurts the innocent, even if it hurts you, I will snatch you back. He grabbed my wrist. Come with me. We'll have a new child, 100 times better than Thomas Brown. I lowered my eyes, my eyelashes trembling violently. After a long time, I raised my reddened eyes. Really? Really? He urgently grasped my hand. Alice. Trust me one last time. All right. They'll go with you, but you have to promise me. I met his gaze. I want to deal with Emily Davis personally, and I want the royal seal. I promise you everything. David ecstatically hugged me in his arms. After it's done, Emily will be at your disposal. No. Delays breed danger. I want you to deal with Emily now. David froze. What? Can't bear to part with the child in Emily's womb. I pulled away and looked at him coldly. Then forget it. Wait. David suddenly grabbed my wrist. The last trace of hesitation in his eyes faded, leaving only ruthlessness. There's nothing I can't bear to part with. She and that lump of meat in her womb together aren't worth one of your fingers. David climbed out the window and left. Outside the window, the night was deep and dewy. A blood-red moon hung lonely in the sky. William Summer, Ruby Green, and my Thomas. These debts, I will start collecting tonight from the beginning. Inside David's residence, in Emily's bedroom, servants were coming and going. Basins they brought out full of blood. Emily screamed shrilly, each cry louder than the last. Go call the imperial doctor. The maid cried out. At the crown prince's residence, the crown princess had complications in her pregnancy and called all the imperial doctors to attend to her. Emily's body convulsed violently. Alice Brown, you wicked woman. You're just pregnant. Yet you've monopolized all the imperial doctors. You're deliberately trying to kill me and my child. Who are you calling a wicked woman? I stepped in, followed by a group of imperial doctors. A look of surprise appeared on Emily's face. Good sister, I knew you were the softest-hearted. I sat by her bedside, holding a bowl of steaming medicine. and fed it to her. You're right. After all, we are biological sisters. After drinking the medicine, Emily suddenly felt intense pain in her stomach. This isn't a pregnancy tonic. What did you give me? She looked up, full of fear. Good sister, I was wrong. It's all my fault. But your nephew is innocent. The first gave a cold laugh. Thomas is also your nephew. Have you ever thought he was innocent? Emily writhed in pain and grabbed my sleeve. Sister, I know I was wrong. Please forgive me. When you get to the underworld, go and ask Ruby, Bill, and Thomas yourself. See if they'll forgive you. Seeing that there was no way out, Emily's eyes blazed with fury. You've harmed the imperial heir. Prince David will never forgive you. I curled my lips. Guess who sent the abortifacient soup I just fed you? Emily's eyes went blank, and her grip on my sleeve gradually loosened. I glanced at the chief physician. The chief physician felt Emily's pulse with the other imperial physicians and said, the princess had a difficult birth due to an abnormal fetal position and died. I stood up straight, no longer looking at her, and calmly ordered the servants outside the door. The princess had a short life. She shouldn't be given a grand burial. The servants responded and carried Emily out wrapped in a tattered straw mat. Alice, can you come with me now? Looking at David acting as if nothing had happened, I felt a wave of disgust. Tomorrow at the third watch, when the palace guards change shifts, it'll be the most lax time. I'll lead my men straight to the Eastern Palace. Wait for me in the Cunning Palace. After it's done, I'll come to you. Okay. I'll wait for you. I exclaimed excitedly and put my arms around his neck. At the third watch, at the Eastern Palace, the sound of fighting suddenly rang out within the palace walls. Before dawn, the blood had soaked the jade steps. David's black armor was stained with blood, holding a still dripping long sword. He stepped over the corpses one by one and entered the palace hall. The palace door was wide open, and there was a solitary figure standing inside. Robert, wearing the bright yellow regular clothes of the crown prince, had his back to him. Your Highness. Long time no see. David's voice was hoarse. You're not fit to sit on this dragon throne. Give it to me. Before Robert could turn around, the sword light stabbed straight at his heart without hesitation. Thud. There was a dull sound of the blade piercing flesh. Robert softly collapsed. A smug smile appeared on David's face. He kicked the body at his feet away and rushed towards the Cunning Palace with his attendants. At the Cunning Palace, I stood quietly in the middle of the hall. David pushed the door open and entered. Alice. I've done it. He stepped forward quickly, wanting to hug me. Robert is dead. From today on, this world belongs to us. Come, go to the front hall with me. They'll make you the queen in front of all the civil and military officials. But I took a step back, avoiding his embrace. The crown prince hasn't agreed yet. Has he? David laughed. Alice, are you confused? Robert is already dead. Who do you say is dead? Suddenly, behind David, one of the attendants took off his armor, revealing the moon-white regular clothes inside. That handsome and cold face. In this world, apart from Crown Prince Robert, no one had such a noble air. How is it possible? I clearly killed you with my own hands. The sword pierced right here. David pointed at Robert's chest, his eyes full of shock. A guard behind Robert stepped forward, threw the crown prince's body on the ground, grabbed the collar, and gave it a hard tug. With a tear, the human skin mask was torn off. It was David's own confidant who had been lurking in the Eastern Palace for many years. As if struck by lightning, David staggered back a step and bumped into the pillar behind him. I discovered the spies you planted in the Eastern Palace long ago, Robert said slowly. I played along with your plan. Let him pass on some news you wanted to hear. And by the way, asked him to do me a small favor and die in my place. David Johnson was first dispirited but quickly regained his composure. You can have the kingdom, but the beauty is mine. Robert, You still couldn't achieve fulfillment in this life. David reached out to me. Alice, you said you were willing to go with me. Do you really think I want to go with you? I interrupted him and walked straight to Robert Williams' side. Standing shoulder to shoulder with him. Do you think that in this life, there would be even a tiny place for you, David, in my Alice Brown's heart? But you clearly hate Emily Davis for taking me away. Wishing to kill her immediately, you clearly care about me. David's eyes were filled with pleading as he looked at me. The reason I dealt with Emily in advance is not out of jealousy or hatred for her. Nor is it because I care about you, but to buy time for Robert to counterattack. My words extinguished the last glimmer of hope in David's heart. Just like in the previous life when he took away my hope bit by bit. Karma comes full circle. Retribution is certain. Robert raised his hand. And instantly, countless archers poured in from outside the hall, the cold glint of arrowheads aimed at David. Alone in the hall, seeing this, David laughed wildly. If we can't be together in life, Alice, then let's die together. David suddenly pulled out a fire starter from his bosom and threw it at the curtains with all his might. Boom! Flames instantly shot up into the sky. David laughed maniacally in the flames, spreading his arms and lunging at me. Come on, Alice. Just like in the previous life. You jumped into the fire. This time I'll jump with you. I looked at him coldly. Just as he was about to touch me, I used all my strength to push him hard into the fire. Caught off guard, David stumbled forward. Ugh. The moment the flames engulfed him, a huge burst of sparks erupted. Robert quickly pulled me behind him, using his broad back to block the flying sparks and heat waves. After autumn, the retired emperor abdicated and passed the throne to the Crown Prince Robert. On the day of the coronation ceremony, Robert held my hand and walked step by step up the steps of the Taiha Hall. Officials bowed and shouted, "Long live the emperor." The hall was cold, but his hand was warm. When the edict appointing the empress was finished being read, he personally placed the phoenix crown on my head. Under the respectful gazes of the officials, he took out another edict. My first decree upon ascending the throne: abolish the old system of the harem, shall not interfere in politics. Establish the Wenhua Hall, to be presided over by the empress. To discuss state affairs. Any woman of talent and virtue may take the imperial examination to enter the court and be appointed according to her ability. The entire court was in an uproar. An old minister knelt and remonstrated. Your Majesty, ancestral rules must not be violated. Robert said calmly. Ancestral rules are also made by people. If they are right, they should be followed. If they are wrong, they should be changed. After speaking, he looked at me. I met his gaze, and we smiled at each other. In the 12th month, when the plum blossoms in the Ime garden were at their best, amid the fragrance of plums filling the sky, I safely gave birth to a prince. The delivery room was filled with a hazy fragrance, and Robert almost rushed in. He didn't even glance at the child in the nanny's arms but went straight to my bedside, grabbing my cold hand. Alice. His voice was tight, his eyes carefully scanning my face. How are you? Does it hurt? Are you uncomfortable anywhere? His palm was burning hot, with a slight sweat. I gently squeezed back, shook my head, and tried to force a weak smile. I'm fine, Your Majesty. Don't worry. Hearing me speak, he finally breathed a sigh of relief. After confirming I was safe, he then looked at the small bundle. Robert Williams' gaze lingered on the child's small face. Reluctant to look away for a long while. Issue the decree immediately, he declared, to appoint the eldest imperial son as crown prince, securing the foundation of the state. As these words echoed through the room, everyone was stunned. For over a century since the founding of the Great Liang dynasty, there had never been a precedent where a prince was immediately named crown prince upon birth. The emperor's regard for the empress and this legitimate eldest son had reached an unparalleled height. Have you thought of a name? I leaned against his shoulder and whispered softly. Call him Thomas Brown, he replied in a low voice. filled with deep tenderness. In the previous life, he suffered too much. In this life, I hope Thomas and his mother will be safe and well. A sudden lump formed in my throat, and scalding tears slid down my cheeks, dampening his robe. Robert sighed softly and held me tighter. "Don't cry," he murmured soothingly, his palm gently stroking my back. "It's all over. In this life, our family will stay together forever." Little Thomas smacked his lips in mine and Robert's arms, making soft, fussy sounds. Robert and I exchanged a smile. Suddenly, a sharp bang crack sounded outside the window. Immediately after, countless firecrackers exploded, crackling and popping as if trying to pierce a hole in the sky. Near and far, laughter, shouts, children's screams, mixed with the music of pipes and drums, surged warmly over the palace walls. From the direction of Qian Yuan Hall, bells and chimes rang in unison. A eunuch bowed outside the curtain, his voice brimming with festive joy. "Robert, Alice, the auspicious hour for the banquet approaches, and the retired emperor and empress dowager have arrived in their phoenix carriage." Robert responded calmly but did not rise immediately. He gathered my hand into his palm, interlacing our fingers before saying, "Let us depart." The entire palace city was adorned with lanterns and decorations. Under the long corridors, large red palace lanterns swayed with warm light. On the palace gates, gilded characters for fortune reflected the snowy landscape. In the air, the rich aroma of stewed meat, the sweet scent of candied fruits, and the burnt smell of gunpowder from spent firecrackers mingled. Suddenly, the night sky brightened. Whoosh boom. Fireworks burst open, thousands upon thousands, in gold, silver, purple, and red, illuminating the snow-covered ground and reflecting in his smiling eyes and little though masked curious face peering from the swaddling clothes. Another firework soared upward. The night sky flickered with light, and the world buzzed with clamor. In that moment, all past grievances were washed away, and all storms settled. Only the deafening roar of firecrackers, the warm glow of palace lanterns, and the burning heat of the palm from the person beside me remained. The end.